joining us now to talk about it all is the great Sheil Kapadia of The Ringer. What's up, Sheil?
I mean, a week ago, we're doing playoff predictions, and here we are, offensive coordinator predictions, how quickly things can change in the NFL.
Well, it's funny because it really happens so quickly. The NFL, when you need to make changes, it happens that you are mad on Sunday and Monday, and then it moves so quickly after that Niners game feels like it was 3 weeks ago.
I know. It really does. Really. You're right. That's how it happens.
Not
really. To Ike. No. Ike was just shaking his head. Yeah, so he doesn't feel the same way.
So let me ask you this, because I know the presser just happened, and so I'm just going to ask you, rather than you reacting to what they said, I'll sort of give you the context of something that I heard yesterday, or read yesterday in a report, and was sort of reaffirmed by Nick Sirianni in the presser. The first report was Josina Anderson said that the elite candidates are being told that they will have autonomy over the offense. And Nick Sirianni was asked the question by our own Elliot Shore-Parks, and he said, are you going to have a collaborative approach to the offense? And he was basically like, well, everybody's situation's different. That's really far ahead. I don't know. Instead of saying yes. So the question to you is it tenable to have a head coach where the offensive coordinator has complete autonomy over the offense, and the defensive coordinator has complete autonomy over the defense, and still be able to have leadership that makes sense to everybody else in the organization?
I think so, but also it is very unique, and the Eagles are a very unique organization. You know, you look at other teams around the NFL, and a lot of times the head coach may have more control, more power, more say in a lot of things. We know how this organization is run. Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. Those are the two guys that make the decisions. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. They've won a lot of games. They won a Super Bowl. They've been to multiple Super Bowls. But that's how it goes when you look at stuff like hiring Vic Fangio. I mean, come on, that was not Nick Sirianni calling Vic Fangio and saying, hey, here's my guy at defensive coordinator. When you look at stuff like how practices are structured, when you look at stuff like the analytics department, the sports science department, personnel, none of these things are under Nick Sirianni's control. Now, he's got to be the guy who is in front of the players and forming those connections and dealing with the day-to-day stuff. But yes, it is very different from a lot of other organizations. But I don't know that it's that different than what we saw in like 2024. I know that was probably a little bit more collaborative with Kellen Moore, but I don't think it's that different than that team, and that team won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I look at it, Sheil, and I'm more or less like, sure, it can work, and they've shown that you can catch lightning in a bottle. My biggest concern is sustainability. And when things aren't going well, you got to have some sort of foundation to rely upon to steady the ship, as opposed to blowing everything up every other year and starting over and hoping to catch lightning in a bottle again. That's my main concern moving forward. I don't know who they're going to hire as the OC. I don't know what the perfect hire is or what's the wrong hire. I just know when you have sort of you for lack of a better term, you've taken all the power away from a head coach from the standpoint of the influence he can have on a schematic, from a schematic standpoint, offensively or defensively. I just don't know how much the CEO head coach sort of can hold weight when things aren't going well. When things are going well, everybody likes that coach. Everybody enjoys their role when things are going well. But when answers need to be had and problems need to be solved, when you're trying to pull from this person, that person, and that person, it doesn't often work. So I'm really more concerned from that standpoint, as when things don't go well, how are we going to be able to correct those things?
It makes it more difficult, and I really think it goes back to Jeffrey Lurie's entire tenure as the Eagles owner. You know, I think he had Andy Reid for all those years, and I think if you asked him, if you hooked him up to the lie detector, he would say, that is the setup I think is best, and I would love to find that again, where I have my head coach who's running the offense, who's picking his staff, who is the face and the leader of the organization. Yeah, he works with Howie Roseman and personnel and everyone else in the building, but like, that's the guy. And then he moved on from that, and he went to Chip Kelly, and he said, hey, all right, maybe this guy's brilliant. He's a little out there, but you know what? Maybe he's really smart. I'm going to give him the keys. And that went like a disaster. I think after that happened, he said, all right, if I'm not sure that I'm finding an Andy Reid type coach, then we're going to do it a little bit differently, where we're going to hire guys who we like, but they're going to stay in their lane a little bit, and we're going to help them. We're going to build an organization with Howie Roseman where we have all these different departments that are saying, hey, you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about this. Just kind of coach the team under the guidance that we are giving you. And I know it sounds like, if you're listening to this, you're going, well, what does the coach do? Come on, you're neutering him. He doesn't have any power. And that's not like totally wrong, but also you can't argue with the success in the way that they've done it since they moved to that with Doug and now Nick Sirianni. So that's where I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
They have had success. They also have had, when they just, because then we'll transition into the OC thing, because I have a question about last season and moving forward. They've also had more chaos than a team that's had this much success would normally have. Right. Because we'll go into this as sort of the Super Bowl hangover and who was responsible for the failure. But I think you could look at this situation at a different team and say to yourself, and Sheil asking you this question, could this year have been as simple as our offensive line and running back were beat to hell from the season last year. We had a Super Bowl hangover season physically and mentally, and that was really the cause of everything else that happened. And everything else we're nitpicking. And I think you could look at a different organization that had just won the Super Bowl and look at it an 11-6 division-winning season where all but one offensive lineman was hurt all year, or Justine and Mailata, right? Two offense, and say to yourself, you know what? We're a run-based team. We couldn't run the football. That's what happened. But instead, we're firing the offensive coordinator. The head coach is now in question. We don't know if the quarterback's going to be here. So to circle back to the question, Sheil, isn't it just possible that what happened this year is we had a beat-up offensive line, and because of the structure here and because of all that we wind up with chaos when maybe we shouldn't have had chaos?
Yeah, you absolutely can make that argument. And you are right that for as high as their highs are, when it comes crashing down or things go wrong, man, it comes crashing down pretty spectacularly. And maybe we all put the microscope on it, but you look at how they operate and they are acknowledging that big changes are necessary here, even though they went 11-6. So you're right. If it's another organization, if it's an owner that doesn't want to pay another offensive coordinator, if there's all these different, if it's a coach who says, I don't think so, you're not fired. This is my offensive coordinator. If it's a head coach who has more power and more control, he's saying, what are you talking about? I choose my own staff. It's in my contract. So yes, all those things could be different in a different organization. Now, I could also make the other argument that it was the 11-6 kind of fluky. Did they win a bunch of one-score games? Did they get better injury luck than most teams? Even though you had the offensive line injuries, they had 20 of 22 starters available for their playoff game. They had a quarterback healthy in the playoffs. So even with all those things, you still kind of, no one was that confident going into the playoffs. So yeah, it is a difficult one, but you're right. If I had to just say, maybe this season just came down to the offensive line not being that good because guys were injured. That is not unreasonable to me.
I'm fairly cemented, Sheil, in thinking this next year is really about Jalen Hurts moving forward. And we're going to find out at some point this offseason if they believe that Jalen is the guy moving forward by solidifying potentially his future with an extension or not doing it. And that being said, what goes into hiring this offensive coordinator? Are we hiring someone that is there to get the most out of Jalen, that'll be able to cater offense around him? Or are we hiring someone that has a system that they want ran and Jalen needs to be suitable to run that system? I'm just wondering what's the Eagles' approach to this offensive coordinator coming up when I think doing what's best for Jalen Hurts should be at the top of their list.
Yeah, I think you want someone who is a proven guy. Now, if you see an up-and-comer and you're really convinced, that's fine. But I want someone who has a track record of they can cater their scheme around their personnel, but I want to hand them the keys. And like, we've talked so much about Jalen Hurts' preferences. Well, he might not like to throw it over the middle. Well, he might not be that comfortable under center with play action, with different motions. Like, I don't care about any of that stuff right now. And same goes for Nick Sirianni. You know, we talked about it at the top. I don't care what his preferences are because we've seen that for 2 years here. And I know they won the Super Bowl the 1 year, but we remember the conversations we were having in week 15 that year. We weren't saying this offense is a well-oiled machine. So it has been multiple years here. I know they have their preferences. I know they have their credibility, but guess what? What I know about Jalen Hurts is that he does care about winning. And so I need someone with a voice who can say, Jalen, you might not like doing this, but guess what? This is going to be best for you, best for our offense. You're going to get reps of this in training camp, in OTAs, and mini camp. I believe in you. I know you can do it. We'll go through some bumps in the road. Don't worry about it. By the time we get to October, November, you're going to be firing on all cylinders. This is going to be a Super Bowl caliber offense. I need someone with that kind of voice. If they hire someone and the message is, well, this guy worked with Jalen somewhere. Oh, well, Sirianni knew this guy from a different stop. I'm going to be like, did you look for the best guy or did you look for the most comfortable guy for Hurts and Sirianni? Because I don't think that's the same thing, and I don't think that's going to lead to a winning team next year.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I agree to an extent, but then I also think to myself, it might be a situation where you could tell him from now until September that we want you to be under center, play action, this, that, and the other. And maybe he's just not good at it. And that I think to myself, is this sort of like saying, let's say the Rams, for example, right? Let's say their offense wasn't that good this year, and they were doing the McVay style offense, whatever. And they said, you know what, we need a guy in here who's going to figure out how Matt Stafford can run the RPO. And everyone will go, well, why would you do that? He's good at the other thing. And you would say, well, it didn't work this way, so we should have an offensive coordinator who is comfortable enough to make Matt Stafford run the RPO. So I wonder, I just wonder if what you're asking for and who he is are incompatible. That is the question I'd have.
And that's when a guy like Mike McDaniel, who I think is a really good offensive coach, what he does is the opposite of Jalen Hurts' strengths. I kind of want to see it to Ike's point. Maybe you do it. Like, I want someone to give it a shot all the way through. And it doesn't have to, I'm not saying you have to lead the league in under center play action or throwing over the middle. I'm saying there needs to be some more variety, some more problem solving, some more answers in this offense that haven't been there the last 2 years. And so you can't only play one way, the way they've played with such a small volume of plays, a predictable offense. You can't play that way. We saw it the last 2 years. So I want someone in that says, hey, we're going to give these different things a shot. And maybe we are having this conversation next season, the end of the year, going, well, they brought in this guy who specialized in different things. They tried it. It didn't work. Well, now we do have to have a different conversation about Jalen Hurts, about how do you build an offense around Jalen. So it is sort of one way or the other. Either it's going to work and it's great, or it's not going to work. And now you have some decisions to make as an organization. Well, what do we do now? Because we know Jalen Hurts can only play one type of way. So we're what? We're not even a week after the season. And I'm like, next year's a huge year, man. There's a lot on the line here, but that's where we are.
I'm telling you, Sheil, this is so intriguing because listen, I'm a Jalen guy and I want to do what is best and cater to him. But there is so much truth to bringing in something that maybe he's not comfortable with and figuring out, can he do that? Because you got to decide whether or not you want to continue on with this. So it all depends on, like, do they want to continue on with Jalen or do they want to find out, is it him or is it a system? Because I think they've been trying to figure out which has been the issue. We don't know, is it Jalen or is it trying to find an offensive system to fit around him? So bringing in like a Mike McDaniel or someone like that, that would surely put the pressure on Jalen to have to perform.
I said this yesterday. If they hire Mike McDaniel, Jalen Hurts won't be the quarterback in 2027. There's just that is.
What if he steps up and he's able to do it?
Great. Okay.
Well, listen, I mean, he built an offense around Tua, who everybody would say is a very limited quarterback, and he made it a very specific way. Where with Tua, he's like, the ball's coming out, you're throwing with anticipation, you're hitting in the middle of the field. Well, so that doesn't mean that that's what he would do everywhere.
But Sheil, ultimately, and I'll go to McVay for a second here. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, McVay looked at Jared Goff and he said, good but not good enough. can do it, but can't do it the way
I think his had more to do with the intangibles.
Well, maybe,
You know what I'm saying? Like
too.
Matthew has a little bit more stones than
he
Jared.
does.
Yes.
Like but it's also worth noting that Mike McDaniel ended up benching Tua eventually, and because he just couldn't do it enough, right? I would say that Mike McDaniel probably got the most out of Tua that anyone could have gotten out of him.
Absolutely.
I would guess, yeah.
But in the end, it wasn't enough.
Yep.
You know, so, all right, Sheil. Well, just an off-season of intrigue. You know, for the
just getting started.
For the contentsmen, and we are Eagles fans, but we are also contentsmen. If you're a contentsman, this is quite an off-season. So thank you for a great season, Sheil, and I'm sure we will talk to you very soon.
Always a pleasure, brother. Always.
All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
There he is, the great Sheil Kapadia.